Good day. It's Wednesday, first day of February. Welcome to the Cory Morgan Show. As you see, I'm back from my 2 weeks down in the sunny south. It was sunny down there in Arizona. I wouldn't call it warm, though. I hit a lot of cold snaps. It was a good break and a good trip. I got to admit, I did miss you guys. I need to get out and rant and rave a little. Nico's got some pictures there. We free camped out in the desert. You know, it's a real libertarian sort of thing. You can see that nice big old bulldog of ours sitting out there. We had the solar panel and the generator in the works. So you could basically camp without cost on your own. People don't get on your case, and you use what you can. There's some shots from the other joys of the blizzards on the way down. And I blew a tire whilst on the trailer and other such things. But either way, it was a good break. My mind's been kind of reset, and I'm ready to rant and rave and get on with this year. It's going to be a busy one. We got a provincial election coming up in Alberta in a few months, and of course, federally, things are always a gong show. So as people are coming in, it's good to see you using the chat area. That's what's important. This is a live show. I like the interaction. I mean, that's the thing with doing this. You know, I make mistakes now and then when it's live, but we get back and forth. So good to see you checking in there. Jake, Yasha, Wild Rose, Scott, folks from all over, Greg Nichols. Welcome back to the show, Yasha, after my break. It's good to see you all here again. And it has been quite a trip. Something else I did, I might as well throw that out there and get it while I'm at it either, Travis, is I managed to finish a book I've been working on for quite some time. It's called The Sovereigntist's Handbook. This is something, I've talked about independence. I've talked about sovereignty for quite some time. Good to see Keith out there from Newfoundland, and Steve, by the way. I actually sent a copy out to Newfoundland. It surprised me out of the orders, but that's okay. There's still some I like to think some useful stuff in there. There's a lot of things on how to politically organize, how to get involved with parties, how to do stuff like that. It's more of an instructional book. The people who want to get independent, they already have their independence plans. This is for those who have come up with that, but how they're going to get around to it. So yes, the books are out. Hey, if you want to check them out, they're at gvlbooks.com. And I'll gladly send you a copy of it. All right, so maybe I'll talk about some of the stuff that I did, and get on with my thoughts while I was down there. So as I said, I just returned from a 2-week road trip through the United States. And it's always nice to take a break from local issues and attitudes and absorb some of that hospitality and positive attitudes of individualism you see down in the American Southwest. So for the driving time, I chose to listen to the audio version of Barack Obama's book, A Promised Land. Yeah, I know, before you all get going. I'm not suddenly a fan of Obama's progressive policies and his high-spending Keynesian approach to economics. I do like to listen, read, and learn, though, from former leaders, and there can be positive insight to be found in their writing. I mean, René Lévesque's memoirs, for example, are a must-read for anybody interested in regionalism and Canadian politics. I mean, love or hate Obama, or Lévesque's politics for that matter, it can't be denied, though, that Obama is an intelligent, articulate, and skilled communicator. His voice is comfortable to listen to, and he gets his messages out clearly. And then I was thinking to myself as I was listening to it, what would Justin Trudeau's memoirs be like, though? And I had to laugh to myself. I mean, to begin with, Trudeau would need somebody to write it for him. And few, if any, words in the publication would be his own, unless perhaps it was a pop-up book. And if Trudeau were to narrate the words for an audiobook, it would be unlistenable. I'd rather spend a day under the tender mercies of a vivisectionist with a rusty razor than subject my mind and ears to hours of Trudeau's vacuous, breathy oration. While a written version may be less painful to consume, there'd be little of merit to be found. I mean, what would Trudeau talk about? 8 years in power, but really what? His wardrobe decisions? Preferred surfing locations? Maybe his favorite reality TV shows? I mean, I really got to ask the stubborn Liberal supporters out there who just can't seem to let Trudeau go, when will the novelty of this man wear off for you? It's embarrassing enough as a Canadian in general when Trudeau pulls some ridiculous stunt or does something idiotic on the world stage. How bad must it be, though, when you're on the Liberal team? I mean, this is your guy. Will Liberal supporters never tire of the gaffes and fiascos? I mean, how must it have felt for his supporters when Trudeau decided to use the Queen's funeral to bring a celebrity entourage on a trip where he held an embarrassing and insulting karaoke party in a hotel lounge? What about when Trudeau earned ridicule around the world as he insulted India during his weeks over there with his bizarre penchant for playing dress-up in the cultural clothing of other nations? How many more surfing trips during National Days of Remembrance could his supporters endure? I mean, does it hurt internally for Liberal supporters to see Trudeau ignored by other world leaders at summits when they've found little time to spend on a guy who's too busy wanting them to admire his latest cute socks rather than talk policy? I understand partisanship. I understand some Liberal supporters will never support the thought of or entertain the thought of voting for a Conservative Party under any circumstances. Okay, I can respect that. But can the Liberals at least start working on finding a new leader? I mean, the nation's in a tough spot. The economy's sputtering, inflation's roaring, and unity is shattering. Canada needs a respectable, strong, and intelligent leader in there, and Trudeau's incapable of providing any of those things. I mean, there have been, and I know it's not what everybody likes to hear, but there have been some bright, pragmatic Liberal members in the party. Isn't it time to give one of them the top job? A new leader would bring a new cabinet as well. And let's face it, Trudeau's unfortunately been prone to stacking cabinet positions with people he sees as his intellectual peers, and it shows. A leader less cerebrally insecure wouldn't feel threatened by filling cabinet positions with strong, intelligent people. And Canada needs those kind of people in power right now. I don't understand the appeal of the Liberal Party, but again, I can respect it. I'll never understand the ability, though, of Liberal supporters to endure idiocy from their leadership. I'm beyond caring right now if Canada's Prime Minister is Conservative or Liberal. I just want one who is intelligent. Is that too much to ask? Apparently it is. So that's what's got me ranting and raving. Like I said, I find inspiration in all sorts of things and all sorts of areas. You know, while I'm driving, you get a lot of time to think. As I said, on that road trip, I was on the highway for hours and hours and hours. We hit a number of blizzards. I really got to get better at driving a fifth wheel while I was coming and going. And yeah, as you see, that was outside Salt Lake City with that upside down vehicle. I'm not sure how he managed it. It was a straight stretch. I mean, as you can see, it was icy, but this guy managed to get it on top of his roof like that. It was a little hair raising, but it gives me a lot of time to think. And these are the things I think of, plus a plunger full of shreddies. So that's a separate story altogether. But yes, good to see you, Tracy, and some of the others popping in. And yeah, Alan talking about what the narration of it would be, again, if it was Trudeau with his ums and ahs of an audiobook. Like I said, it's enough, isn't it? I mean, okay, they wanted change. You know, Canada went from Stephen Harper, who was a bit dry and buttoned down and, you know, a straightforward policy wonk. And here along came Trudeau, okay, with the nice hair and the planking and the, you know, something different, refreshing. Okay, again, I still didn't vote for him, but I can kind of see how people did. But after this long, isn't it time, guys? Have you not had enough of this clown? I mean, he refreshed the office all right, and now it's starting to rot from within. And it stinks. It really stinks. By the way, I'm going to have a guest coming on. I should get to that. I get on my routines again. Stewart Muir, and I'm looking forward to that. He's with Resource Works, and we're going to be talking with him about liquid natural gas and getting hydrocarbons to market in Canada, which has been a big problem. And he works a lot out in BC and northern BC because, of course, it's been a challenging area. Good to see you guys, too. Brenda and Lisa and Richard from out in Kitscotty. Everybody's checking in today. A good busy day. So, yeah, I mean, the weather's kind of, it's a winter day again and everything else. So speaking of the rot, speaking of how screwed up our federal government is, our you know, the mismanagement of bureaucrats. Most of you have probably already seen that story. I mean, you know, credit to Michelle Rempel-Garner. I can never really tell where Michelle's coming from or where she's going. Sometimes she's brilliant in there. Other times she's so woke. I wonder which party she's with. But she had a notion and she thought and she followed through and checked into, you know, what the costs were for a quarantine hotel in Calgary. And it was outrageous. You know, we're seeing that in the news. It came out to $453,000 per quarantine guest in a period of less than a year last year to put them in a hotel. 15 people, because the pandemic was virtually done already. Yet we booked this hotel at a cost of millions and millions of dollars. What was that total? It was insane. It was near $6 or $7 million. I think $6.9 million. To do what? To do what? And this was last year. Come on, guys. How can you not believe we got some backdoor corruption going on here? Whose palms got greased? Where did that money go? This is just one hotel in one city to keep 15 people for a little while. As been pointed out, you could buy every one of those people for that price their own home permanently for a lifetime. How many dozens of hotels have the Liberals been pumping millions of dollars into like that? I said it before. I don't know. It might be just pure waste. But I wouldn't be really shocked if somebody in there had some Liberal connections. Because, boy, that sure is a lot of money for very little services. And even if it is just incompetence rather than corruption, that's no less unacceptable. This is our money. We've got massive inflation. We've got addiction issues. We've got homeless problems. And this is where it's gone. Millions of dollars to quarantine hotels sitting around. And they got no excuse. They can't say they were locked into a long contract on this. It was found that, no, they could have gotten out of that with 30 days notice at any time. Yet they maintained this hotel for a whole year, even beyond the time when we needed to quarantine anybody. I mean, of course, the hotel didn't say anything. Hey, if you're going to cut me great big checks to keep my place empty and sitting here, why not? It's easier than dealing with maids and guests and everything. But this is just becoming so constant, so chronic. This ties back into what I was getting upset about before. This is what happens when you have a prime minister who isn't terribly bright, who isn't well in control of his party or the country. It just throws money blindly at things. And this is what happens with it. And again, it's just one example. I mean, it sounds like, yes, it's a drop in the bucket. Oh, it's $6.7 million out of billions, or getting to the point of close to $1 trillion in debt. Well, it's a lot of money. It adds up. It adds up. And they have no respect for it. If they can't respect 6 million, don't worry, they're not respecting the billions either. And this is what you're paying for. This is what you're working for. This is what's happening when you're sweating to make your mortgage payments, when you're figuring out how to pay for your kids' post-secondary education, when you're looking at how expensive it is to buy groceries. And we've got a government that kept an empty hotel sitting in Calgary for $6.7 million. And that's just one. We got to flush that government, you guys. That's why I'm at the point of almost, just begging the liberal people then, fine, you won't accept conservatives. Fine, but change the bloody leadership. Let's get somebody else in there. I get most upset when it's somebody on my own team who does something stupid. I expected of the other guys. Shouldn't you guys be getting sick of Trudeau yet? Oh, some are. Here was a little shining light that came out a little bit. And this was, getting over that bill C-11. The Liberals want to control the information. They want to control what you hear. They want to control what you see. And we've been talking about this bill for over a year now. They really want to control the internet. They want to control the message. They've been paying off legacy media for long enough. Now they're finding it's sneaking through on the outsides. This is the time to remind everybody, by the way, and I see the things below. The reason we can do this, the reason we're independent, is because we're subscription-based, because we answer to you guys. So check it out, by the way, if you haven't subscribed yet. This is the reason we can afford to be on the air. We can afford to talk about these things that the other media outlets won't, is because we rely on those subscriptions. And other media outlets like True North and Rebel, they're doing the same thing. And that's it. You see, the government's trying to control the message, and the message is still leaking out despite them. So then what do authoritarians do? Well, they try to control our platforms, such as YouTube, such as Facebook, such as Google. And C-11 is that sort of thing. Thankfully, at least, I don't know if it's going to be enough to stop it, but we're seeing some voices speaking out. And this was a liberal appointed senator. He basically, his name is David Richards. And of course, he was a novelist and a screenwriter before he got appointed to the Senate. And he has ripped into it. He said, this is one of the things, he said, the law will be one of scapegoating all those who don't fit in to what our bureaucrats think Canada should be. Yes, it's controlling thoughts. It's controlling words. He said, Stalin again will be looking over our shoulder when we write. These are not minor words, and this is from a senator, a liberal-appointed senator, no less. That's what I was saying, too. And I know some people say, no, don't expect anything of liberals. And I don't expect a lot of them when I'm begging them to find a new leader or to change their government or update things. There are some liberals out there who still have some principle. And David Richards is an example of it. He's speaking up. Where's Paula Simons on this? Alberta's liberal senator. And, they hate that. They say, no, we're independent. No, you aren't. Spare me that crap. Paula Simons voted for the anti-pipeline bill that was going to shut down Alberta. And now, as a former journalist, and she did some good work, by the way, she exposed some terrible things that were going on in the social services system in Alberta, for example. She was a very accomplished journalist. But once she got into the Senate, appointed by Trudeau, she became a good lockstep liberal. And she's accepting these threats to our speech, these threats to our expression, these threats to freedom in general. But at least this senator's speaking up. And boy, the words. I mean, it's almost, as you can see, he compared it to Nazi Germany. And I don't care for that when it's done. But, it sounds like too much hyperbole, and it leads to the old Godwin awards. But there's truth to it. I mean, the bottom line, it's authoritarianism. It's a government that can't accept messages from differing people from differing minds, and they want to control it. And that's what C-11 is about. This is a solution in search of a problem. I mean, there is a problem. The problem's for the government. And they're going to make it our problem. And that's where they can suddenly, if they can get this sort of thing through, that's where they can shut down this show, where they can shut down the Western Standard, where they can shut down Post-Millennial, all these alternative media outlets out there. This is scary stuff. This is fundamental freedoms. You look at any democracy, one of the things they always protect in their charters, in their bills of rights, things like that, is a free press. You need that. If people can't hear what's going on out there, well, they become docile, right? And look at some of the terrible things that authoritarian regimes have done. So let's see, Jackie Burdensing, Cory, have you had an idea? We hear he's calling an election this spring. Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. There's the things with a minority government, right? Jagmeet Singh's certainly stamping his little feet and trying to act as if he's independent. Speaking of people, putting on a song and dance and a show, and he's demanding that Trudeau intervene into provincial jurisdiction and stop Alberta and stop Ontario from expanding the ability of private medical provision under a universal system, publicly funded. He wants him to step in. He's been making all this noise. But will Jagmeet actually pull the pin on the Liberal government? I doubt it. I really doubt it. This is as close to power as Jagmeet can get. And look, he sounds like an idiot. I mean, really, anybody who knows even a little bit about the Canadian system knows it. This is no more privatization than we've always had. It's just expanding it a bit more. Doctors' offices are private. Walk-in clinics are private. There are all sorts out there. Like, eye surgery clinics. There's all sorts of private facilities within our system already. And for Jagmeet to sit here and pretend something new is happening and demand that Trudeau step in and intervene on it. Hey, again, I'm selling a book on provincial, sovereignty. Trudeau, if you want to keep stepping in and listening to Jagmeet and come in on provincial jurisdiction for healthcare, be my guest. But I don't think he will. So as far as the election goes, though, getting back to politics, Jackie, he won't call it unless he thinks he can win. I mean, he's had two minorities in a row. I'm kind of surprised, as I said, that the Liberals are still supporting him even now. He needs to turn the page. There's no way they will put up with him getting another minority. He has to win a majority if he wants to maintain his prime ministership any longer beyond this term. So they won't pull that pin unless they're confident they're going to win. And I don't see that yet. The Conservatives federally are actually looking a little stronger in the polls right now. And you'd have to see some sort of issue that breaks things down. But again, it's a minority government, so you never know what could happen. If a scandal breaks out with the Conservatives or something strange or just something brilliant happens and the Liberals can capitalize on that, they will call an election in a heartbeat. The average minority government in Canada lasts 18 months. That's the average. So we're already there almost with this government. So, the chances of an election, I don't see the circumstances coming along to warrant it yet, but I wouldn't rule it out. And, you hear a lot of that from the Conservatives. You'll see that in your emails. If you're on Conservative email lists, they'll always say we're on the brink of an election, but that's because it's good fundraising, guys. You want to make sure people are reaching in their pockets, funding those parties to get ready for what may be an election. And in a minority situation, you're kind of always in campaign mode. Paradoxically saying the whole country needs a good flush of leadership. Yeah, it is. It's a frustrating thing. I don't know what it takes, but we need it, and we need it on all ends. It says Kippy 80 saying our local public hospital remains closed. Ford's making a story that private hospitals are needed to meet capacity. I don't know. He's not doing full-out private hospitals, but we're talking about specialized clinics. I mean, I don't know the Ontario situation specifically enough to parse each and every facility that may be opened or closed or things like that. But we got to watch with some of the almost inflammatory language when it comes to trying different things within the health system. I mean, people have turned it very much into a sacred cow, and there's a lot of myths. When people scream about the privatization and they try to compare things to the American system and things like that, and people forget that most of our provision is actually already in private facilities. It's just full-blown hospitals that are always fully run by the public system. And by the way, they're not always all that efficient. But lots of specialized clinics and places that do procedures were already in the private sector. One example I'll give before I get to our guest, just to talk about that, because I heard a bit about that with somebody complaining or upset that the reality that they could go down and get an MRI and pay cash out of pocket and get it right away, but they'd have to wait 6 or 7 months to wait in the public system. Yes, this is true. Or actually, and you could buy one in Alberta faster. We did that with Jane when she had back issues. We paid ourselves. And yes, sped things up. But what people forget, way back with Saskatchewan, when they had the NDP there, that NDP government there, Romano, he was actually good at balancing the budget and things, but he stuck very much to the anti-privatization of any form of healthcare, and he fought MRIs brutally. Well, Saskatchewan waits for MRIs got as high as 22 months towards the end of the 90s. So, Sure, some people can pay to jump the line now, but the public system will bring you in now at a fraction of that speed. Because other people are paying up front, they're able to speed the line for everybody. So it does pay off in the end. Set aside the fact that people are getting in there faster than you are, and just look at the outcome. As long as we're all getting in faster, isn't it better? I mean, the other way, and what'll happen is they will set them up in the United States. They'll just have it right on the other side of the border. So if people have the means, or the other thing is they're not always wealthy people. That's a bit of a myth. They're desperate people. They're people who really just need something done. And they will go down there. So if we're going to have people spending out of pocket to go a little faster, let's keep the money here. Keep the professionals here, keep the clinics here, keep the infrastructure here. And, just get over the fact that some people are going to get in a little faster. It's a better way to go about things. We've got to see. Here's Wild Rose, and we've discussed that here before. I mean, it looks like Stewart's having perhaps a technical issue with something. He's in the lobby. We're going to have him on really soon here. But any for-profit healthcare will end up with people dying in the hospital steps for lack of a credit card. Wild Rose, that's a load of crap. That's a load of crap. That's the fear-mongering crap I was talking about. And I know we've talked about this on here before. We already have that kind of care. Plus, the best systems in the world, the ones that are outperforming us, are in Europe, are in Asia, and they have universal coverage. None of that dying on the steps for lack of a credit card. But they do have more private provision. And yes, there's a profit in it. And guys, profit isn't a dirty word. It isn't. Socialism is. So, okay, that's enough ranting out of me. I think Stewart's just about set up there, and we'll pop him in. So let's run a quick ad here, and we'll talk to Stewart, turn the page a bit and get on to some energy talk, before, so I'll stop barking at Wild Rose there because, he's a good fan and show regular, but we differ on that issue, that's all.
Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Without the CSSA, our gun rights would have been taken long ago. These guys are on the front lines helping to draft smart and intelligent firearms regulations and legislation in Canada, and more importantly, educating the public about how we keep guns out of the hands of the wrong people. To become a member, it's absolutely worth every penny.
Yes, a good group, and they've been a good sponsor. Okay, there's Stewart there. I know you're coming in from out in Ottawa, I believe, Stewart. So I appreciate you coming in to join us today from out there in the land of the East. Oh, I think your microphone might be muted, Stewart.
There we are. How's that?
Much better. Okay, we've got you now. My lip reading's pretty good, but not everybody can necessarily catch it. These are the joys of being live. So thanks again for joining, and it is Ottawa you're at right now, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. I'm in Ottawa within view of the House of Commons. I've been talking with people about energy issues, in particular LNG here today.
Yeah, and LNG. So, maybe we'll start, though, just giving a little background on yourself. You're with Resource Works. It's a BC-based group, though you talk about energy issues across the country, and particularly LNG lately. What else is your focus, I guess, would you say?
LNG is a big part of it because gas, whether it's produced in Saskatchewan, Alberta, or BC, gets to markets and influences our way of life in lots of positive ways. It creates a huge amount of income for governments to support social programs, and that is a profitable thing for businesses to engage in. It creates a lot of employment. So that's a good thing. We also work for better awareness of mining opportunities. Pretty much every politician right now is talking about critical minerals, which is great because that's the EV, the electrification future. We need those. But you know what? We also need the more traditional, old-fashioned, if you will, minerals that have been used for thousands of years. Minerals like coal, like copper, molybdenum, silver, gold. All of these things are a huge part of the Canadian economy. So the problem right now is that it takes often decades to build a new mine. And at the pace that humanity is looking for solutions to the need for everything in their lives, we need to produce those. And right now, the regulatory system is not creating conditions for new projects to be advanced. Same thing in forestry. We see that too. Here's a renewable, almost the ultimate renewable building product. If you're building a house or we're using products made of paper, we're not allowed to have plastic straws anymore. They have to be paper. Well, that paper comes from trees, right? And those have to be grown and harvested, managed, and then processed into the things we use in life. We also look at the coasts, things like aquaculture and fishing. So all these things, you put it together, you say that's a natural resource economy. And 10 years ago, we started for the purpose of building awareness of how these are, first of all, fundamental, even today, in the way of life that we enjoy. Whether you're working up close or you live in a city, it doesn't matter. You're just as dependent. And we've had economic studies galore that have proven this on having that economy. Hey, it's not always glamorous or the dazzle that some people want, and that's fair. But you know what? It's still fundamental to our way of life.
Yeah, so with resources, I'm glad you said that. It's a broader thing. And the one we're hearing the most about in the West in general, though, and that's, I think, one of the, even speaking on particularly this time around, but every resource development area is suffering from that regulatory regime and some ideological challenges going on. And so the liquid natural gas, that's a really growing world industry right now, and Canada is really well placed. I mean, we have a lot of resources, but boy, we're having a hell of a time trying to get infrastructure in place so that we can take advantage of that and export it. I mean, that's part of what you've been explaining over in Ottawa this week, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I just listened to the CEO of Enbridge, Greg Ebel, tell a room of policymakers and people who pay attention to these things that it's not a question of building things. If we want to build infrastructure, he said that a pipeline to the East Coast could be built in 18 months. It's not a question of whether we have the ability. Of course we have that. Alberta, above all, has that. It's whether we have the regulatory certainty to attract investment and get those decisions made. That's what's tying us up and leaving us in knots as a country.
Yeah, well, something that's been difficult, I wrote on that recently too. I believe there was 18 or 15 proposed LNG terminals over the last 10 or 12 years, and only one is really under full construction. At least, thankfully, that one looks like it's going to be going. The ones all on the east end have all been shut down, and the others, people have basically backed away, not for lack of a market, but they just can't feel confident that they'll get a return on their investment. How are things going, though, with the CGL line? I mean, that's something I think any potential investors are watching carefully. Like, can this even get completed? If we can't even get that done, I can't see any future ones being constructed.
Yeah, I don't think there's too much question as to whether it will get done. We did see today in the news that TransCanada has announced some additional cost overruns on that. It's now, I think, 10.6 billion US that we saw this morning. That may have some impact on investment intentions in regards to owning the stock and what that means. In terms of will that asset be completed? Yeah, for sure it will be completed. It's probably 80% done. And now they're in a phase where they're building sort of the more difficult stuff. The terrain there is unbelievable. You go from that run that there's the final leg down to Kitimat. You're talking about high mountain passes. There's even an aerial tramway like you see at a ski resort, but I'm sure built for the incredible weight of pipeline components that had to be constructed to position some of these pieces. That's what we're talking about in this terrain. The costs, one can only guess, given the price escalation. It's more expensive to feed people. Any family knows that. Well, imagine you're feeding 5,000 people at a work camp somewhere on the CGL line or at LNG Canada. All that has to be paid for, and no one anticipated this. So costs are going up, sure, but so is every family's costs. So I don't think that is the big thing. It really does come back to the regulatory certainty. We also don't need to debate the idea that this is a useful commodity. We don't need to debate whether the world is going to pay a premium for it, because long-term contracts, 20-year contracts are being signed. If that wasn't happening, we could debate that, but there is commercial interest in securing these molecules. So all that's left really is for politicians to say, okay, I can do this. And we saw some good news today from a pollster. We had Abacus pollsters who are kind of well regarded in Ottawa for being able to put things together in a way that reads the political times we're in. And I thought the top line number for me was that the impressions of LNG among a coast to coast sample that was a very solid polling method that no one would challenge, I don't think. They said that the impressions of LNG among Canadian residents are 43% positive and only 34% neutral, and then a small number like 9% negative. Very few people in this country are against it. So if you're seeing in social media, in your feeds, you're seeing things come up, don't do this, don't do that, or this horrible toxic polluting. No, that does not reflect what Canadians think.
Yeah. So beyond what our common Canadians think, how's your reception been with the political class in Ottawa this week? I mean, as you've been explaining this, does it sound like some pragmatism might be finally kind of sinking in for some people and realizing that they've got to change the regulatory scheme?
Well, I think there's always been plenty of people in Ottawa, just not the right ones, who are holding the stick to get things done. And looking across a room of 100 or so policy wonks today at lunch, I thought there was a really good cross section of that world. Most Canadians, the vast majority of Canadians, vote either Liberal or Conservative. That's 80% of MPs. That's most of the country. So if you look at that group, they're in the room. And the problem is, I think, for the Trudeau PMO, that's love them or hate them, they're in their way trying to figure things out politically so that they can accomplish whatever it is they're trying to accomplish. And I think it's really important for them to know that when you look at the numbers and what Canadians think, that you can not lose votes today by supporting LNG. That's what we heard from the pollster who explained this. You could pass all the regulations needed to get pipelines built and LNG plants approved, and that's not going to cost you power. I think that's really important for politicians, not just federally, but also in BC. That's where a lot of really important decisions are going to affect a next wave of decisions. We've had 10 years, Cory, 10 years of inaction. You go back, you talked about the 15 projects that, most of which never came about. A couple more of those can go forward, so that we don't have a second lost decade. I mean, that would be the tragedy, that having seen what can happen, or not happen, I should say, in 10 years, we go into another decade and come to the same result. That would be a true travesty and loss for Canada.
So I mean, one of the areas that opponents to hydrocarbon development like putting out, and I see that your group, Resource Works, put out a good report on that is subsidies and incentives. I mean, people like saying, oh, oil companies are just pulling in all these subsidies and it's costing Canadians a fortune to keep maintaining hydrocarbon development and these things. But I mean, there's a lot of misinformation kind of going on when people talk about what's a subsidy or what isn't, or how much is actually going into the energy sector, if at all, in some cases. I mean, it's tax deferrals and things like that, but it's kind of a complicated area for people.
Well, let's simplify it. If you're seeing that message coming at you, just ask the question, is someone trying to affect me by making me hate big business? Are they trying to take things away from personal responsibility? Because you could equally say of these things, oh, it's Joe and Jane down the street, they're causing this problem because they want to have a warm house. They want to have a car that can take their kids to school. Those people are evil. You could equally say that. But instead, we have the lobbyists who are pursuing the extermination of Canadian opportunity, who are saying big business is trying to get something for nothing so they can get all these profits. Well, I think anyone, whether you don't have to be a small business owner or a manager in a company, you just have to manage a household budget. I mean, everyone who plugs in that way knows this. If you're just pointing the finger at someone else and saying, oh, it's on them, right away we can be suspicious of that. It's about personal responsibility. So when I see these subsidy arguments, it's not about subsidies. Actually, the Ministry of Finance in Ottawa has gone through all the so-called subsidies, and they've removed them. They'll tell you that. What they have, though, are incentives. And in public policy, without getting into the weeds on this, it's an instrument of every government to encourage people to do things that the government prefers them to do and not do things that government would rather they don't do. And that's how taxes are used. That's how all kinds of policy instruments are used. And that's normal. But what's happened is the anti-fossil fuel activists are taking instruments like that and pretending that they are subsidies. They're painting them as these sort of free handouts when really they're anything but. And that's, I think, important to understand if you're hearing this stuff. It just doesn't add up, this argument.
No, we hear it a lot, and it's just a hard one to counter because it's easy to throw it out there and just cause the doubt, and it takes a little while to explain to somebody, putting off taxes when they're putting in a heavy capital investment on something like an oil sands mine doesn't mean you're giving them a check or cutting them money. It just means that you're not taking from them until they start bringing a return in on their funds. But the disingenuous way that they paint that as a subsidy causes a lot of mistrust with a lot of our energy sector industries, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, next door to Alberta in BC, there's a spending spree going on the social priorities of the new Premier, Premier EB. He will be going to the polls, no doubt, at some point to get his own mandate to run a government. For now, he is obviously seeking to make his mark by spending on housing and healthcare and all kinds of social programs. You might ask, well, where's he got the money? Well, it turns out he's got a ton of money because high natural gas prices have produced a bounty of revenue for the BC government, and he's spending it. So, for someone in David Eby's position, and he hasn't become famous or, influential or powerful by being seen, supportive of industry. He's more with the kind of social, environmental, urban crowd that got him in. I think someone like that, if you're running a Canadian province, any Canadian province, at some point you need to be practical and pragmatic about things because it's about the people. It's not about the politics. And to serve the people of British Columbia, any premier will have to recognize that you need to have the money coming in so you can spend it on whatever it is your priorities are. If that's housing, affordability, then do that. But you need to acknowledge where it comes from.
Yeah, well, in reality, always sinks in in the end one way or another. But it'd be better to have foresight rather than being forced into it.
You got that right, Cory.
So before I let you go back to the land of the Ottawa crowds over there and making the case, is there more you'd like to share with our viewers today before I let you go?
Yeah, I think we have in Alberta an enormous amount of gas, an opportunity to be part of that. I think that if someone's listening, call your MP's office. That's what a lot of pressure groups do, whether they're organized or unorganized, and tell them something, because the staff, take that down, and they may not, put it in the hands of the MP right away, but they, it's their job to do that. We might feel like we're just individuals and can't influence anything, but we can call our MPs and tell them what we think about things, and try to have some notes about what you want to say and make sure it makes sense, and do that. Just take a minute or so to do that, or write them a letter or send them an email.
Great. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, when there are electoral butts on the line, it's amazing how receptive they can get. The reality is they do follow public opinion. We just have to let them know what we want to see. And your website, it's ResourceWorks that you're at. Is that resourceworks.ca? I'm sorry, I don't know.
It's resourceworks.com. And thanks for showing it on the screen there. What you see there is a little clip of my recent presentation, again, here in Ottawa. I come here quite a bit nowadays. At the Standing Committee on Natural Resources, where I talked about a number of things, including a little country of Qatar. At that time, the World Cup was on. I noted that this country was basically able to pay the $220 billion tab for hosting the World Cup because of natural gas exports. Most of it is LNG, and we could be just as competitive. We could be a superpower of energy like Qatar is, but we've chosen not to be, which is a lost opportunity. And we can change that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for coming on today, Stewart, and I'll let you carry on with that important work.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you. So that was Stewart Muir with ResourceWorks. So resourceworks.com. And as Nico showed, with those screen snaps, there's a lot of resources on there you can look at, things you can check into, studies, papers they've done. And he's on the ground out there working. There's some truth to that, and that's the thing. If you push these politicians, even David Eby, BC, he's hard left. This guy is a NDP to the core. We're not talking about a lightweight. Yet he's quietly accepting, despite he was an environmentalist, he came through the ranks of shut down everything, shut down the Trans Mountain, shut down the CGL, and now he's in, and suddenly he's kind of quiet on that, because even NDP politicians realize we got to pay the bills somehow. They can borrow, and they will, and they do, and they can tax, and they will, and they do. But in the end, you still need some resources coming in, and natural gas has given him the funds to be able to do those things, and that can happen across the country. Just to mention, I see a commenter, Danny Lorraine from out in Newfoundland. Yeah, so across the country, this can help everywhere. And Wildrose is saying if Alberta, or just even Alberta and BC, get a pipeline to the east, Energy East. That one drove me bananas when it was shut down. We're talking about a line to get out there. Though I believe that was oil, but all the same, we can get gas out there. We can do things. Quebec has natural gas. The world wants this resource. And Prime Minister Ding Dong there, Justin, when he told Germany's chancellor, you can see the look in his eyes when Justin, there's no business case for that, for liquid natural gas to go to Germany. What a load of crap. And People have said, oh, the reason that the Energy East got shut down was because there was no business case. No, the only reason there wasn't a business case is because the government regulated it to death. They didn't do the studies to do those pipeline expansions. They didn't do the work, the groundwork on Keystone XL, for example, or Northern Gateway, or all these other pipelines that have been shut down. These companies didn't do that thinking there was no business case for it. The problem is the government just kept getting in the way and getting in the way and getting in the way and gouging them and hitting them and slapping them and causing uncertainty, where they finally said, okay, fine, we're out of here. That's what happened with the Trans Mountain. That drives me nuts too when you get jerks on social media. Oh, Trudeau supports the oil field. He bought the Trans Mountain. Nobody asked him to buy it. He didn't have to buy it. All he had to do was get out of the damn way. Kinder Morgan wanted to build this thing. But Canada's regulatory system is such a convoluted joke that finally Kinder Morgan said, we can't get this thing done. We're out of here. And now, since the government's taken it over, the costs on this thing have exploded. And of course, the timelines keep expanding. Maybe we can get there. I mean, the ideological battle, the ridiculousness. And again, getting to natural gas. I mean, we saw that recently. That was the thing. The natural gas is suddenly, this is a pollutant in your house. This is causing asthma in your children. This is going to kill you. Yeah, that's what these nutcases put out there. And that rotten legacy media supports it. They push it. There was a thing I shared from the Hill Times on Twitter the other day, which showed eggs frying in a pan and talked about the poisons and dangers in your house from natural gas. We've been using natural gas for a century. And these clowns saying, we think natural gas will cause asthma in children. Well, guess what? Alberta, over 70% of the homes in Alberta have natural gas running in them, and they're using it as their primary form of energy. Not always just on the stove, but it's the furnace, their water heater, all over the place. Alberta has the lowest asthma rates in Canada. Explain that to me. If this natural gas is this secret killer that's giving all our kids asthma, why is Ontario leading the country for asthma, where they don't use as much natural gas? After that, it's, I believe, Nova Scotia. Where's the logic, guys? Again, it's just they will make it up and they won't get countered in it. And that's where, again, people like Stewart at least work on things and counter the disinformation, the narrative, the ideologues, the extremists. We have so much opportunity. I mean, if we want to deal with things, I'll get back to something else too. I mean, the addictions epidemic, that's hitting across the whole country. And we're seeing it in every city. It's a mess. I mean, that's stuff we've seen a lot of Arthur Green's been working on in Edmonton, taking, the pictures showing that in transit lines and on the streets. I mean, the discarded syringes, the people in distress. It's a lot of money to get them out of it. I give Jason Kenney some credit. One of the things he did do, it was really good, and it took a while, but he did it right. I mean, he expanded Alberta's addiction treatment beds. We have over 8,000 spaces for addictions treatment. It's expensive. It's very expensive. BC is trying the legalization route that Portland used, which caused their overdoses to explode, by the way. It doesn't work. Enabling doesn't work. You don't give a gambler a bunch of money. Well, we'll just give him a weekly allowance so that he can be stable until he quits gambling. It doesn't work that way. He will still gamble himself to death, whether it's a suicide or whatnot later. And you can't give somebody a safe supply of meth. You need treatment. And it's expensive and it's difficult. And if you want to do those things, you need to use your resources. We're sitting on some of the most abundant natural resources in the world. The world wants our products. Germany wants our natural gas. Japan wants our natural gas. Our prime minister, who is an idiot, won't facilitate it. And what does he signal to investors when he mumbles and refuses to commit to supplying them when they come here cap in hand asking us to supply them? Well, it tells investors, I'm not putting money into Canada. I can't get anything done. We got a prime minister who's opposed to my business. I'm not going to do that. And it shows, and it chills the investment across the country. And it's not just the West. It hurts the West the most because that's the area that Prime Minister Trudeau despises the most. And we have the industry that he's ideologically opposed to the most. But it hurts all of Canada when he does that. Whether it's a coal mine on the East Coast or natural gas developments out there or a mine of any other kind or even manufacturing, when you've got that much overbearing regulation crushing you, then you can't get anything done. You'd be crazy to put the money in. But again, we got to stand up. We got to push back. Lots of the comments, politicians equal crooks, from Kippy and I know the frustration, the cynicism that comes with things. But a point that's valid and very much that Stewart put out. And, just to throw another shot back to the book, the bottom line, if you're looking to push sovereignty and things like that, the politicians, to a degree, will follow the lead of the people. You have to push them. They don't change your mind, or at least they're not terribly effective at it, but they will flex to meet what they think your mind is, like where you're going politically. So if you push for a lot of independence from within a party or showing things, the politician's going to start leaning that way if they want to keep their job. And as Stewart was saying too, if you let your MLAs, you let your members of parliament know, and it's self-serving, it's for themselves, that's fine. But if they realize, wow, there is support for this natural gas, there is support for this development, or there is support for sovereignty, well, these politicians then, if they want to keep their jobs, they're going to reflect that. So it's kind of up to us. But we got to correct them. There's a battle going on, guys, and we're losing it. Canada's losing it. Again, do you want all this health care? Do you want all of this child care? Do you want the education? Do you want, again, the treatment for addicts? Well, the money's got to come from somewhere. And here we are sitting on this giant pool of it, and we are allowing ourselves to be hindered in getting it out. And where are they putting the money they get? Again, that gets back to where I was ranting about before, where we could spend $7 million to have a hotel house 15 people for a short period of time. Or yeah, some of the other lunacy I see from Gary Armstrong about a 15-minute city in Edmonton. Yeah, that's that. I don't have time to even get into that today. That ideological lunacy from urban designers and nutcases. It's going to cause a disaster. Furthermore, but we've got it in Calgary. He said Calgary soon. No, we got Mayor Gondak, who has an $80 billion climate change plan she wants to put in place. So yeah, don't worry. Our civic politicians will break us soon enough. And what are they doing with the money they got? So this is an interesting one. 8 years after the Parliament passed the Veterans Hiring Act. So they're trying to find jobs for veterans. This reflects a bit on Trudeau's just transition. Prime Minister Pinhead thinks if we could shut down the energy sector in the West, but don't worry, we'll transition them to new jobs, right? Well, they didn't find veterans any jobs. In fact, Stephen Harris, the assistant deputy minister, says, we believe in it, but we have no numbers. We have no numbers. They don't know. They don't know how many veterans they've actually hired with 8 years of this program, with millions of dollars tossed into it. It's just a bunch of bureaucrats running in circles. The ones you are putting to work are these pointy-headed bureaucrats shoveling one piece of paper to one desk and shoveling it back to the other. They're all working from home now, and they're doing squat. We know we're doing squat because you look at outcomes like this. They can't even give a number of how many veterans were hired. 8 years they've had on this. Millions of dollars. So how many, if they shut down the energy sector, how effective do you think they'll be in finding new jobs for them? How well will they transition them? How many windmills can we really build? But this is what we've got going in there, and this is where the money goes. This is the problem with the bureaucracy. And it doesn't serve us. So, I mean, the government doesn't need more money. They don't need more money. They need a kickstart. I don't know what it'll take, but to start managing the money they've already got well, or better. I mean, we've got the CRA bureaucrats, the Taxpayers Federation's been making a lot of noise about that, rightly so. The CRA, they want a 30% raise. These are the jerks that have been sitting at home since COVID for the most part. They aren't even going into work. And they're threatening to strike for a 30% raise. Everybody else is tightening their belts, and the parasitic bureaucrats, and they don't get any more parasitic than the Canadian Revenue Agency, actually, they want a 30% raise to keep coming after you to take your money to throw into things like this veterans program that can't tell us how many people they've hired, or hotels that house, 15 people for $6.7 million. Yeah. We've got a lot of big problems in Canada, guys. I mean, here's a great example, too, that we saw at the House of Commons. I believe the video is on the westernstandard.com. They had a motion to condemn Tucker Carlson over comments about using the military to remove Justin Trudeau. Now, if you watch Tucker Carlson's show, he's like me. He rants and raves. He's on daily. He's an American pundit. He's on Fox News. He makes those statements. He wasn't being serious. I'm pretty sure. Even if he was being serious, do you think Biden was going to, Tucker Carlson said we're going to use the military to remove Trudeau. We'll go out and run the tanks up there to Canada and do it. So I'm sure some people might like to see that. It wasn't serious. It wasn't real. And it sure as hell wasn't worth spending the time in the House of Commons, which is what they did, to say we have to condemn this. We have to have the government take the time in our highest house of power in the land and discuss and debate and condemn the statements of an American pundit on a TV station. Really? You guys got nothing better to do with your time than worry about that? God, I'm surprised they didn't get on condemning Jeremy Clarkson while they're at it, because there's the big cancel thing going on over in Britain, right? Let's use Parliament for that. We've got some bigger things to deal with, guys. Speaking of freedoms, this has been another one that's been big. So the Society for Academic Freedom and Scholarship, they came out and spoke on how it was wrong, to prohibit Dr. Widdowson. She's a professor. She was fired from Mount Royal University in Alberta, and she was going to speak at University of Lethbridge. And of course, the woke, the clowns, the snowflakes, the weak-minded, and you are weak-minded. If you are so pathetic, you can't tolerate somebody speaking to somebody else, the problem is yours. Don't like what Widdowson has to say, don't go. But that's not the woke, that's not the left, that's not progressives. No, we have to shut them down. We have to shut them up. So yeah, they've shut her down. She said she's going to go there and speak anyways. It'll be interesting. The veiled threat from University of Lethbridge was along the lines of, we'll do what we have to protect the safety of our students. Because as you can see in the picture there, Ms. Widdowson, Professor Widdowson, Dr. Widdowson, would threaten the safety of these snowflakes on their campus if she dared to even speak in a classroom. This is pathetic. Guys, what happened to free thought? And this was a bigger issue than it should have been, because Widdowson used to have tenure at Mount Royal University. And for people, if you're familiar, tenure means it's supposed to protect professors from just this very sort of thing. It's supposed to say, we will make sure you do not get unduly terminated from your role or pressured or fired as an academic, and you can speak of things even if they're considered controversial. And I tell you what, if it was, decades ago, the controversial professors were the ones saying they should integrate multiracial universities. They were considered controversial in the South. They needed protection. Mississippi professors daring to say that we would allow black students to come into our university in the 1950s could lose their jobs. So things like tenure were around to prevent that from happening. To say, you don't agree with this professor, that's fine, but you don't dare shut them up because this is too important. This discussion's too important. And now we're shutting up Widdowson. You don't have to agree with what she's saying, but people understand how important it is to allow all of these professors to speak. And we aren't. So the university caved. They've blocked her. She can't speak there. And we'll see what this turns into. And it's not good, guys. This is a bad, bad trend. Another one, Gad Sad. He's a professor and academic in Canada. I strongly suggest you look him up and look up his things, because he talks on this a lot. He did he put a book out. I read that one. It's called The Parasitic Mind. And he covers a lot of that. This garbage that's gotten into our academia, these what are supposed to be institutions of thought, of examination, of thinking. And instead it's moved on to groupthink. And it's dangerous to us all. It's dangerous. I mean, if you don't like what Widdowson has to say, organize a counter speech and counter it. Organize a debate. Don't shut them down. And we're seeing the same thing, attempted things with Jordan Peterson. Looks like to a degree, he's too big to fail. He's still packing his venues in Canada. Even though groups are trying to shut him down, they tried to shut him down out east, and they failed. The protests. There was another interesting thing. Just sidetrack. So they were expecting all these big protests against Peterson during his presentation in Ontario there the other day, because 30-some groups were opposing and saying, we've got to shut this man down. We're not allowing Dr. Peterson to speak here. There were squat for protesters. Nobody came out. Well, this was manufactured. These 36 groups, 36 extremists, probably getting tax funding. And CBC gave them oxygen, Global gave them oxygen, CTV gave them oxygen, legacy media made it sound like there was a big groundswell against Peterson. Most of the people in the world, if they didn't like Peterson, didn't care. Okay, well, I'm not going to buy tickets. I'm not going to go see him. Geez, that's not too complicated, is it? But they want to make this atmosphere of shutting down debate, and it's a bad one. It's bad for all of us. Looking on a interesting and bright side, some polling numbers out just recently. Speaking of legacy media, I mean, I saw the headlines from Don Braid with the Herald. Against all odds, Danielle Smith and the UCP might be poised to win the spring election. No, it's against all of the effort and work you clowns have been doing for the last 6 months to demonize the UCP and try and discredit Danielle Smith as much as humanly possible to keep her from winning. That's what it's against. And yes, the votes, I mean, it shows, at least from these polls, that it's tight. It's tight, it's statistically a tie, but looking at the balance of votes and where they land and everything, if they stay where this pollster said they were, then the UCP would still win a narrow majority. Well, I tell you what, the legacy media and the establishment are going to fight tooth and nail all the way to the end on this. All the way. They want Notley back in there. And it's going to be a rough and tumble battle. That's part of why I took my break when I did, because I tell you what, the Western Standard is going to be busy as we lead up to that election. It's going to be vitriolic, and we're fighting over some principles and concerns like we haven't seen before. The main thing with Smith and what she's doing, she scares the crap out of them. She's actually looking to change things. That's why they get so upset. It's not right or left, it's change they're terrified of. They got their big, bloated, comfortable system. Leave it alone. Just give us more money, but don't change anything. She looks like she's got the will to actually shake the tree, to change some stuff, and it's got the establishment, well, crapping bricks and sweating bullets. And the polls are starting to show, though, that it's coming around. Alberta we're not socialists. We don't have a vote split that happened the last time Notley got in. It's not there. People aren't as warm on Smith as they were with Kenny initially when he went in, or as past conservative leaders, but they're warming to her, and they certainly still prefer her over Notley. And you don't have a second party splitting it up. As I said, right now, the Independence Party is small, and they got Arthur Pawlowski leading it. They'll have their little niche, but they're not going to really take much, I think, on any urban seats or have much impact at all. I mean, especially if you look at the past electoral results. And the Wilders Independence Party, again, they were going okay, but then they've ripped themselves to shreds with infighting. So the UCP is the only conservative option out there. It's going to be a two-party race. And for the most part, Albertans have no interest in going back to another term of NDP. Another interesting one that's on the Western Standard site, this poll came out across the country, apparently, and was talking about the amount of Canadians who were receptive to the idea of their provinces joining the United States. This one's kind of interesting. And, of course, Alberta was the highest proportion with 21%, but even in Atlantic Canada, we're looking at 11% favorable towards doing it. And Ontario, second at 19%. Ontarians aren't necessarily all content with the status quo either. Like, this country is getting uncomfortable. I'm going to go back. I see Gerald Jones commenting, St. Francis widows, it's Widowson actually, Gerald, deserved to be fired. No, she didn't. You don't understand tenure. You don't understand free speech. She deserved to be fired because she said things that were contrary to the woke? I think not. I see. She says, I'm a MRU student, far-right propaganda. All right, so yeah, you're a snowflake. I don't care what you think then. Sorry, I thought there was going to be some intelligent discussion going on there, but I was mistaken. He's just trolling now with the NDP stuff. So that's the depth, though, of the NDP, and this is as far as they can go in supporting things, is to come out and troll some live shows. But I thought maybe there'd be a discussion on why a person may or may not have tenure or be able to speak freely as a professor, but Gerald is not capable of that kind of discretion. So speaking of some of the last things, to throw in a note to keep the things inflamed as we end up the week. SNC Lavalin, yes, City of Calgary has appointed them to deliver the Green Line LRT. So we'll have a subsidized Eastern Canadian corrupted company working in Calgary to build this Green Line that will build an LRT station to help deliver catalytic converter thieves more efficiently from downtown to the outlying southeast suburbs in Alberta. So yes, things are getting better and better. We really got to pay attention to our municipal politicians. Well, that's enough ranting and raving for today, guys. It was a good full show. It was good to be back. Lots more coming. We got lots of digital content, by the way. Make sure to follow us on all of them, guys. Facebook, Rumble, YouTube. Share it. This is how we get these things done. We got David Creighton's show. It's been fantastically popular. Watch for that. Mel Risden does her stuff. Check out our channels, guys. Subscribe to the Western Standard. We don't have to fall in with the rest of the legacy media. We got enough of that already. I will be back next week. The pipeline's going to be on tonight. I'll be on that as well with Derek and Nigel. And keep at it, guys. I appreciate you, and it's good to be back.